And thanks for joining us today on our third installment of Zoomin' In. I feel very fortunate to be able to spend time with Rishi Reddi, class of 1992, for today's segment. Thank you, Rishi, for being here with us. I was so pleased to attend your virtual book launch last week. Welcome.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Mielle.
Hope everyone can see this beautiful book I have in front of me, so it'll be fun. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. First, I'm going to read Rishi's bio and share a little bit about her background, which is she's very multi-talented. So Rishi is the author of 2 books of fiction, Karma and Other Stories, and her latest book, Passage West. Karma and Other Stories was the winner of the 2008 Penn New England LL Winship Prize for Fiction, which is a really big deal. Stories from that collection were published in Best American Short Stories. They were broadcast on National Public Radio. She performed at New York City's Symphony space. She received an honorable mention for the Pushcart Prize and was chosen for the Boston Book Festival's One City, One Story community read. Rishi's debut novel, full-length novel, Passage West, has been recommended by The Bustle, Book Riot, Ms. Magazine, and The Millions. It's a sweeping saga which is set in rural California at the onset of World War I. It relates the story of a Punjabi family. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Great. Punjabi family, their Mexican in-laws, and their Japanese neighbors during an era of tightening immigration laws. Rishi was born in Hyderabad, India, and lived in Great Britain and several regions of the United States before attending Swarthmore College and Northeastern University School of Law. She's worked as an environmental lawyer for the state and federal government for more than 25 years and served on the boards of Grub Street, Boston's Creative Writing Center, and SALT, a national nonpartisan organization that represents the South Asian American community. She's also served as the Massachusetts Legislative Liaison for Amnesty International USA. Her essays and translations have appeared in the New York Times Magazine, the Asian American Literary Review, the Partisan Review, and she has received grants and fellowships from the MacDowell Colony, Bread Loaf's Writers Conference, the U.S. Department of State, the Massachusetts Cultural Council. She lives in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Rishi, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Mielle. So nice to be here.
This will be fun. I was so excited when I was able to attend your virtual book launch last week. And I actually received my book in the mail, but not till 2 nights ago. So I'm about halfway through now, but I feel like I have a good feel for the book. It's a beautiful book and beautiful story. First off, I just want to ask you, how are you and your family doing during COVID-19?
Well, we are holed up here in our home in Cambridge and, you know, doing what everybody else is doing, trying to do lessons, school lessons at 10 o'clock and at 11 o'clock, and then trying to juggle that with my day job and then trying to juggle that with a couple of these type of events. So it's a little bit crazy and everybody's pitching in to help everybody out. And we're all getting a little irritated and annoyed with each other and then, you know, coming together again at the end of the day. So it's a long haul.
It is a long haul. I feel you. There's 3 of us plus a dog in my house. So, and it's not a large house. So yes, we're feeling it. Can you tell me, since our audience will be primarily attorneys, can you tell me why you chose Northeastern Law?
Oh, yes. Well, after I graduated from Swarthmore College, I knew that I wanted to go to law school, but you know, I just couldn't have done another traditional 3-year sort of in school for 9 months and then out for 3 months. And then it just felt like too much of the same. I just wanted to get out in the world a bit more. And Northeastern seemed a great fit for that. And the ability to sort of attend school for one 9-month section and then be out in the world and juggling that in a much more intense way. It was completely up my alley. I don't think I would have gone to law school at all unless I had had that option.
Great. Happy to hear that. Were you always a writer that picked law school as your next step, or did you develop into a writer after law school? And did law school impact your decision to become a writer?
Well, I had always wanted to become a writer since I was a child. And after, you know, I started talking about this with my folks when I was in college, both of them advised me very strongly, do something practical where you will actually be able to earn a living and go out and be independent in the world. And they felt that writing really wouldn't do that. So I had to, I felt like I had to choose a career that would be in line with my skills and things that I felt like I could be strong in and involved in the world with. And so I chose law, and that's how I came to law school, believing all along, like through going to law school, I'm going to be able to see how the world works. Like I could see the gears rolling behind the scenes, and it would actually be a good education for a lawyer. So it became a natural sort of dovetail. It fit nicely together for me. And I'm very, very happy to have that influence of the law on my writing, and actually to have the influence of my writing in my practice of the law. I feel like these two fields really fit together in a way that makes sense for me and what I've wanted to do.
That's great. It's good to hear. So it was definitely not just a side way.
It was not a sideway thing. And in fact,
it has
it has become something that's very central to the way that I've looked at the world. And I don't think I could separate it now. It changes. Going to law school changes one, at least that was my experience in terms of being able to, brush the curtain aside, see what the man is doing behind that curtain type of thing.
Terrific. Next, I have a quote from Professor Lee Breckenridge, who has joined us virtually today. She said, she is not only such a talented author, but she's also one of the finest environmental law grads that I have known over all my 3 decades Northeastern University School of Law. So there's a lovely quote for you. My question is, you still practice law, and speak about that for a moment. How do you balance both? And does your environmental background, you touched on this a bit, influence your work? How do you balance both?
How do I balance both? It's always been a challenge, and it's been a day-by-day challenge. So when I was first starting out, what I tried to do, because I knew I had some writing assignments that I really wanted to finish. I was working on a collection of short stories. I would get up really early in the morning and try to write when I was freshest in the day, and then go into work, do my law job, and then come back and sort of be on that cycle for a while. And it was difficult, but it also added structure to my day so that I was able to think about, what am I going to work on for my writing tomorrow? What is the piece that I'm going to focus on? The long parts of the writing, the first drafts, the dreamier parts, I would set aside for, like, maybe I would take a week off or something, and I could focus a little bit more on that. But, for the vast majority of the writing, it was sort of piecemeal like this. And the structured day did help me, even though it was a source of frustration at times. I mean, I have to be honest. But ego-wise, having these 2 careers has really been a help to me, because when I would have a frustrating day as a writer, or I'd get yet another rejection for a story that was sent out, or, what have, I would feel like it doesn't matter because I have this whole legal career, and they're really worthwhile work that I'm doing that not matter. And the same thing was true if I had an especially frustrating day at work, at my law job. I would be like, oh, it doesn't matter, I'm really a writer. So it was a game that I would play with myself, and really, and I continue to this day. So I don't know, I forgot the second part of your question, Mielle, please. Yeah.
Does your environmental background influence your writing?
It does. I mean, there's definitely stories in Karma and Other Stories that have an environmental bent. And my next thing that I'm just conceiving of right now definitely is based in environmental issues. But in Passage West, which is based and set in a farming community, the way that folks think about land and the way that they think about the relationship between humans and nature, I think all of that is very much incorporated into the book and influenced by the way I've thought about my environmental work. And most recently, I've taken on the role as an environmental justice advocate in state government. And this definitely has a facet of civil rights law that's embedded in it. And certainly this book, Passage West, is all about civil rights, human rights issues. And I really have a hard time separating them out. To me, it's becoming more and more of a whole.
So, all right, we're going to dive in a little bit, but tell me, so you wrote Karma and Other Stories, and that was 12 years ago? Or no, it was longer, and you
Karma and
spent
Other
12
Stories.
years.
Yeah, it came out in 2007.
Okay. And did it spark the desire to write a full-length novel after that? Or were you never sure when you started this, it was going to be a full-length novel? I think it takes a ton of courage. I want you to talk a little bit about Grub Street a little bit and how that's sort of stimulated you and helped along the way, just because there might be other wannabe writers, kind of like myself, on this call, on this Zoom, who want to know, how did you get started? How did it all come together?
Well, I actually got the idea for the book Passage West when I was in law school, and we read the case of Bhagat Singh Thind, who is the South Asian man who had enlisted in the U.S. Army during World War I. And using that, his experience in the Army, he applied for U.S. citizenship, and it was granted to him through the state court. But later on, that citizenship was challenged, and that case went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and he ended up losing his citizenship. The Supreme Court rescinded his status based on the fact that he was not white, because an immigrant in those days could have only been granted an immigrant if he or she was a free white man. So because of that, I started reading and doing a lot of research on the population of South Asians who lived in the U.S. At the time. And I was surprised to find that there were so many South Asians that lived then, and that so many of them had enlisted in the Army. Several had also gained U.S. citizenship. When the U.S. Supreme Court revoked Thind's citizenship, there were about 63 or 65 people at that time that were automatically stripped of their status as U.S. citizens. So this was all stuff that I learned, because of this research stemming from this law school experience. It was very, very important to the conception of the book. So in those early days, I also started taking classes with Grub Street, which, as we know, many of us in Boston know, it's sort of the heart of the writing community here in Boston. And it was actually founded by people that I was friends with shortly after they had graduated from the BU writing program, and I was into the BU writing program. Okay. So I knew them from early on, and I took my first I took my first writing class there after college. And that was where I workshopped many of the stories that became part of Karma and Other Stories. And my affiliation with that group and my friendship with the folks that have been involved with Grub Street has been longstanding, and they've been, huge supporters of my work. And I hope that I've been a huge supporter of them too. So they're really valuable in our arts community here in Boston.
And as a beginner, you can walk in there and people will not laugh at you, even though the rest of the world.
Yeah, no, they will not. And believe me, it's like, the rest of the world will laugh at you, but you walk in through those doors at Grub Street, nobody will laugh at you. And they want to help you tell your story, and they want to help you tell it in your words, in ways that has meaning to you. And they are very conscious about trying to bring in a diverse variety of voices, of ages, of folks that live all over our city and all over this part of Massachusetts. Really valuable group.
Have you mentored other writers?
I, for a while, taught a class as a BU, and I'm part of a writing group. I do read other people's work. So it's all part of, we're all part of the same tribe, and not many people understand us if you're outside of this crazy tribe. So we all have to hang in there together. So I really do try to do that whenever I have an opportunity.
That's lovely. I am going to read a quote from Book Trib about your current work. We're going to dive into it. As background for our listeners who may not have read it yet, it takes the reader on a sweeping journey that follows a family of Punjab sharecroppers, their Mexican in-laws, Japanese neighbors at the onset of World War I. It reveals little known aspects of California's and America's past. And this resonates with much of what is going on in America today. Today's climate and treatment of immigrants. It's all very timely, I feel. I'm going to read you this beautiful quote. It's a richly layered historical novel that tells the stories of ordinary people living in extraordinary times. Reddi is a fascinating storyteller. The book's themes of racism, discrimination, and anti-immigration disconcertingly resemble the divisiveness of the United States today. It's dramatic and moving and so much more. Was this Passage West a personal story for you? And are there familial aspects woven into it? Tell us a little bit about the background of this novel.
Well, there are parts of Passage West that are really far from my experience. So, of course, the chronology of it, the fact that it's set at the beginning of World War I, and the fact that it's set in California, which when my family first came to the United States, we did settle in California, but really that was only for about 2.5 years. And then we moved out of that area completely. And the point of view of the novel is told primarily through men, because they were the folks who were experiencing the things that I wanted to write about. There are many women in the book, but the points of view are through men. So there, in those ways, it felt like a distant book to me, and I had to make many jumps, and to inhabit those characters, and I did that through a great amount of research. But there were other things about the book that felt very close to my experience, and that's the sense of displacement. I was born in India, and I moved with my parents to the US in 1971. I was very young, and we always considered going back to India, especially if things happened to not go particularly well here for any reason. So that decision of should we stay, should we go, was something that was always in the air with us. Also, the closest family members, other than my parents, had remained in India. So my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, folks that were integral parts of my life. I couldn't be like my best friends who had a grandmother living in the next town. My grandmother was 3 continents away. So in those ways, and in that experience, it was very similar to these characters that I wrote about.
Yep.
And it was very healing to see that their experience so many years ago was very similar to my own. And it continues to be such a common story in the United States, not only for South Asians, of course, but immigrants from all countries.
Yes, often sending money back to the homeland. One of your main characters really seemed to want to return. The other one had sort of made it here in America and was, I feel like, adapting maybe more than, is it Ram? Is that how you say it?
So the 2 main characters are Ram, who is a young man when he comes over. He's quite an innocent, and he's very naive, and he desperately wants to go back because he's newlywed, and he is the father of an infant son whom he's never met. And then he's his business partner and his frenemy is Karak, who's very different. He's about 10 years older. He's a man of the world. He desperately wants to stay in the United States. He's embraced American values, or what he conceives of as American values, very completely, and has no wish or desire to go back. And the story follows the relationship of these 2 men in their ins and outs and their battles and squabbles and the times that they come together. So that too was meant to represent, I think, there's a whole spectrum of immigrant experiences, and I wanted to explore them through the characters of these 2 men, because I could travel a lot of ground as an author by depicting these 2 people who were very different from each other.
You did a really, really nice job at that. And also I feel the love of the land that definitely comes through. The sweeping setting where they are, it's fairly close to Mexico. It's just, it all comes through and shines through beautifully. I have have a couple more questions for you, and then I'm going to see if you'll do a reading for us, because it's so fun to
Okay.
hear an author read their own words to me. Your book just came out. I think it launched April 21st. We had the virtual book launch. What is the process like leading up to a book launch in a pandemic? What types of publicity are you doing? How do you do this all virtually? Describe that a little bit.
Well, I had wanted the book launch to be at Porter Square Books, which is my neighborhood bookstore. It's about half a mile away. And then I had wanted us, you know, the group of close friends and family who would have come to that, we would have walked across the street to the Colette Wine Bistro and, you know, just had a grand party. That was my, you know, that was my dream, and my family was going to fly in and, you know, all of that. Okay. So that quickly was canceled, you know, in mid-March. And what it became instead was we were scrambling, and you know, we decided to go online with everything, and we had this huge Zoom event. And because of that, I have family that are now spread out all over the country and the globe. So although I couldn't have this like very warm, intimate launch, which is so valuable in terms of connecting with, you know, writers crave connection with their readers, because so much of what we do is by ourselves in our single rooms with our dog, you know, at the desk. But instead of that, I got this Zoom event where we had, you know, about 225 attendants from Mexico City and from Hyderabad, India, and from London, and, you know, all of these things that couldn't have happened otherwise, you know, all over the United States. And that too was very moving. You know, I saw these little blips of my love moving across the screen. You know, it brought tears to my eyes to think about them in their little postage stamp photos traveled across. So that was very lovely in itself. I was scrambling because how are we going to do this? I just had no idea. And I'm a bit of a Luddite. And I had these wonderful friends that stepped in. You know, Mark Foster said he would do the Zoom account for me. He was very experienced in doing it with fundraising. And my friend Chris Castellani, who's the artistic director at Grub Street, he stepped in and, you know, welcomed everyone as arrived. And my first teacher at Grub Street, Billy Rolled, she's
nice.
It became this completely different event.
And I heard you on NPR this week, I think. Was that this week or last week?
I don't know.
WBUR, yes.
Oh,
So
it was last week. Yeah. And so everything has been moved online. And, you know, it's very, you know, media is it's such a chaotic, such an organized type of chaos anyway. But then to have this move online was, you know, had an added dimension to it. And here we are worrying about lighting. You know, I couldn't just prepare readings. I had to prepare lighting and prepare, you know, where am I going to sit in my house, you know, and all of this stuff. So very different.
I went with virtual backgrounds. It's easier than seeing the
well, the tulips are very nice.
So many of us are wannabe writers. Can you tell us a little bit about what gave you the courage at the very start and how you would encourage someone who thinks they may have a novel inside of them?
Well, I would say, of course, the thing that everybody says, which is to read a lot, and that's true. But the added portion to that is, I think you have to set up some sort of way where you can get yourself to sit down at your desk every day and, you know, plop yourself in front of that computer. It doesn't matter if anything comes out. What matters is the time spent there thinking about it, and automatically something will come out. And simply by showing up, that is, you know, what is that saying? Showing up is like 90% of that is so true about writing. And if you can just sit there in that meditative place for a while every day, what you have to say will come out, and it will be very authentic. And it will be about stuff that you really, really want to say. So that's the advice that I would have for folks who want to write.
It takes discipline, right? Like anything else.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I guess it looks like discipline, but in the end, what makes somebody a writer is about that. I have something I want to say, and this is how I'm going to say it. And on the outside looking in, it looks like discipline, that you show up at the computer every day for a certain amount of time. And there is that aspect, but really what happens is an internal process.
Got it. Anything else you want to share? You have a few 92 classmates on our call today. Is there anything else that you want to share about this process and your love of the book?
Well, I mean, I want to say, you know, how valuable the time at Northeastern was for me in getting this book off the ground. I mean, quite honestly, when I first started talking to my editor about how the idea for this book came about, I had to go back all the way to the to sitting, I think it was room 92 or something at the law school. I mean, that's really where it happened. I remember reading the article that I was reading about the Thind case and how it all came about. So it was a long haul for me, but really it all started there for this book.
With Lee Breckenridge. So
and I do want to say, Lee Breckenridge, if you're listening, which I think you are, about how integral she was for me in my whole career in environmental law. You know, every day I think about how much she added actually to the way that I thought about law and my work in the environmental field. So.
Wonderful. I was hoping you would close us out with a reading from your book. I love hearing an author read their own words. Would you do us the honor of reading a little bit of Passage
I will. Oh my gosh, I will. And so I'm gonna start with a passage that's actually right smack dab in the middle of the book. So I'm gonna have to fill in some of the, you know, the character knowledge that a reader would have had about this time. So just to let you know, this is where the character Karak that I spoke about before, who very much wants to settle in the US and is very happy to embrace American values. Part of that is that he has decided to court a Mexican woman named Rosa, who he has met while they are both working on land together. So he is an observant follower of the Sikh religion, and he wears the turban, which is also called the dastar in the book. And part of the history of the times is that many of the South Asians who came during that time were of the Sikh faith, and they wore turbans. But we in the United States called them Hindus because of this failure to appreciate the distinction between the Hindus, the Muslims, and the Sikhs who came at that time. And even though the Hindus were by far the minority of folks who immigrated at that point, everybody, the Sikhs, the Hindus, and the Muslims were all called Hindus. So that's a component of this reading. Karak was emblematic of many folks who came at that time in that he had spent some time in the Philippines and he spoke Spanish fluently. So they were very worldly folks. So in this scene, Karak and Rosa, they go on a picnic. He picks her up in a horse-drawn buckboard. And he's very uneasy because he doesn't know any Mexican customs and he feels very ill at ease in terms of how he's going to win Rosa over. So I'll start reading.
Right.
He came to fetch her in the buckboard, having packed up the food, and they went to the only park east of the tracks, situated between the Negro settlement and Chinatown, when he realized that too many people would be watching them, a turbaned Hindu consorting with a Mexicana. He turned out of town and went along the dirt path that led to the new plank road. He wished he had a machine, one of those new models that were being snapped up more quickly than Ford could make them. That would impress Rosa. He was sure of it. "Why are you courting me?" she asked as they began to eat. His fluency in Spanish came and went. At this question, he stammered, then felt a moment of lightness and laughed when she did. Then he was bothered by that laugh. Was she making fun of him? Did she not think him manly? He had brought roti and beans, trying to cook something close to Mexican food in an effort to show they could be familiar. But Rosa was taunting him, giggling in. "I am a Mexican girl and you are a Hindu." He corrected her, telling her he was Sikh, not Hindu. That was why he wore the dastar. That was why he wore the iron bangle. "Why do they call you Hindu?" she asked. "I do not know," he said. Then he laughed, though he was disheartened by her question. "We are from Hindustan, so we are Hindu. Maybe." He looked at her. "We call ourselves Hindustani." She did not seem to understand the nuance. So I'm a Mexican girl and you are a Sikh. Don't we live in America, he said, where we are equal, he asked. Does equal mean we mix like this? She asked back. So I'll stop there. And I just want to say part of that reading is because in the course of my research, I found out that many of these South Asian men who had settled in California especially had married into the Mexican community there. So there were a significant number of these families with Mexican mothers and South Asian Punjabi fathers. And in the course of my research, it was the children of those families that I interviewed who were about 60, 70 years old at the time that I met them.
Wow.
And they became the heart and soul of this novel. And that they really, those interviews are what made this story come together.
Well, it's beautiful. It's layered. I can't wait to find out some of the mysteries a little bit later on that are hinted at the start of the book. It's gorgeous. I cannot believe how multifaceted you are with this amazing career in environmental law. Mother, you do it all, right? Writer, I mean, it's just unbelievable. So I appreciate all that you've done. I wish you nothing but success with this book. If there's anything we can do on our end to help, I want to. I'll share it with friends. I've posted it on various social media places, but thank you for being here with us today and for sharing your story and just for all that you're doing. I'm so appreciative of you.
Thank you so much, Mielle. It was a real pleasure to be here. And I am so grateful for the support that's from the law school. It was really wonderful to be interviewed here today.
Well, I'll keep following all the great things that you're doing and how Passage West does. So I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you for your time today, Rishi. Good to speak with you.
Nice to be here.